We have a very, very powerful lineup of speakers this evening. Next, channeling this great leadership that Robert F. Kennedy provided for our country. Our next speaker, in her book, said that she is a renegade for peace and for justice. I give you the great Congresswoman from the city of Oakland, Barbara Lee.
Thank you very much, Senator Markey. Good evening. Let me first say to the entire Kennedy family, to Carrie, to Joe, to members of Congress, what an honor it is to be with you this evening as we mark the 50th anniversary of Robert Kennedy's presidential campaign. I can think of no better place to honor Bobby's life and his campaign than here in the Senate caucus room where he launched his bid for the White House. Like many of you, I remember where I was when I learned that Bobby Kennedy had announced his campaign for president. The moment, for me, it was a defining moment, like for many Americans. But personally, as John Lewis just said, his campaign for me represented hope. Finally, I thought, someone who opposed the Vietnam War had a shot at winning the White House. But the Vietnam War wasn't all that was on my mind that day. In 1968, America was bitterly divided. Racial tensions were at an all-time high. Riots were breaking out in cities all across the nation. The fight for racial and social justice was waging and drawing millions of young people to political activism, including myself. As a young person, I followed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with microscopic focus. I believed in his dream. I believed in the hope of unifying our nation. In many ways, Bobby Kennedy's campaign was a signal that the fruits of Dr. King's labor were beginning to be revealed. Sadly, just 19 days after Robert Kennedy announced his campaign for president, Dr. King was viciously assassinated on April 4th, 1968. And that also was a day that changed my life forever. Like many of you, I was shocked, saddened, and angry. I was devastated, but I was also motivated to fight harder for the dream that Dr. King lived his life and died for. I was determined to prove that even though the assassin killed the dream, he could not kill the dreamer, he could not kill the dream. That night that Dr. King was assassinated, Robert Kennedy addressed the nation on the campaign trail, and Congressman Byrne and others have presented this quote tonight, but I think in these times, it's truer and it rings louder than ever. So I'd like to reiterate what he said that night. He said, "What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence or lawlessness, but love and wisdom, and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or they be black." Now, I knew that Bobby Kennedy believed in Dr. King's dream. His life was about that. I also believed deeply that he would fight to make it come true, as he was doing. He understood that racism was tearing our nation apart, and he was determined to unify this country through the kind of intersectional coalition that we rely on today. A coalition that includes people of color, young people, women, everyday Americans. And over the course of his 82-day campaign, one thing was certain. Robert Kennedy was determined to fight for what was right. For 82 days, he spoke out against the Vietnam War. For 82 days, he called for justice in every speech he gave on crime. For 82 days, he challenged young Americans to reach their highest potential. He spoke out against poverty. He stood up for civil rights, and he fought the fight for really the very soul of our nation. The tragic assassination of Robert Kennedy in Los Angeles, California on June 5th was one of the darkest moments in my life and in American history. I will always remember that heart-wrenching moment when my aunt called. She's 97 years old now. She called me at my home in San Jose and told me the tragic, shocking news. I turned on the television immediately, and I broke down in tears. I believe to this day that had he lived, Robert Kennedy would have been the 37th President of the United States of America. I believe that. I'm convinced of that. The courage and conviction which Bobby Kennedy approached public service has inspired me and countless others to speak out and fight for what is just and what is right. So today, as we remember and commemorate his campaign and the values that Bobby Kennedy represented, we remember once again his wise words. Few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events, and in the total of all those acts will be written the history of this generation. Thank you again, and God bless you.